Welcome back. We still have with us Mr. Paul Eluhaiwe, who is the Special Advisor to the CBN Governor on Development Finance. Just before we went on that break, we were talking about how, the CBN has all of these intervention funds, domiciled in different intervention agencies, as it were. Why is it that we cannot just have one straight MPR, as it were, well, we do have one straight MPR, but one interest rate that deals with, all sectors of the economy so that people can access funds directly from the deposit money banks?
Accessing funds from the deposit money bank has never been a problem of the risk sector of the economy.
They complain about the interest rates.
Yeah, they complain about the interest rate. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. They see the interest rates as, but you also should remember that the banks also pick resources from somewhere. At what rate? Interbank rate. At what rate do they pick their resources? In one way or the other. The banks have to, every business is set up for profitability and to be able to break even. Those are some of the issues. If we go into the reason why the monetary policy rate is what it is and why the banks go some steps above the point above the monetary policy rate, we might stay here the whole day. But the case of the case of the matter is that even the intervention that we have today, real entrepreneurs in the economy are not even able to access it for a number of reasons. One, a good number of them don't have the collateral. They are not able to put up proper feasibility studies and business plan. Two, the banks themselves don't even have the capacity. A good number of banks don't have the capacity to assess the need of businesses. The banks are, okay, I'll give you an example. We have a refinancing and restructuring facility that was set up, about 300 billion naira fund that was set up recently. When it was CBN that put up the fund, the resource was supposed to come directly from the CBN. The banks were putting up, we had a request of about 1.something trillion. But when we now said, look, you have cash reserve ratio. We don't have enough resources in CBN to do this again. We are setting aside about 5% of your cash reserve ratio, where you can, based on each bank, where you can lend to real sector. The banks shied away. So the issue is not really the issue of interest rates. It's about what is level of commitment of the banks themselves, whether they are really ready to take the risk that is expected of them. The banks don't want to take any level of risk. The entrepreneurs themselves, like I said, a good number of them are not able to provide banks. They may come out to complain to you about issues, but that is not the real issue.
Ideally, right. If someone has a business idea, you should be able to approach a bank and, they should be able to assess the risk and see how it is that business can be afloat or, or can be floated, as it were.
Right.
But it would seem that what is happening right now is that the CBN, is having to take over the thinking for both the Bank of Industry, for both the Bank of Agriculture, for,
deposit money banks. Let me help you there.
You seem to be taking on all of these functions, which a lot of people will argue the CBN was not exactly set up to take on.
No, we are not taking on their responsibilities. We're only creating funds that they can access, they take advantage of to improve their businesses and help us increase productivity in the economy. We never took any of their role. We don't retain fund in CBN. We send, like I told you, 500 billion naira.
Allow me to come in here quickly. Now we're talking about what they do. I'll go back to how Chamberlain started asking about the monetary supervision role of the CBN. For so many Nigerians, they still think that the CBN has gone into what they call big-time commercial banking. They should be able to put in place some laws that will compel banks, now that we're in a recession, to lend to the real sector. We saw that happen during the Great Depression in the United States, where an act was established compelling banks to lend money to the real sector instead of speculating and trading. Isn't that what the CBN should be doing at this moment?
Thank you. It depends on the economy. In our own environment, it's persuasive approach that we use, persuade the banks, create an enabling environment and see how they can take advantage of it. I do know that in India, it's compulsory, and particularly for agriculture, they zone the banks into various zones. They categorize the banks, and what they do, they specify what bank should lend, a percentage bank should lend to agriculture. That's exactly what you are trying to say. But in our own case, we liberalize the financial system, financial sector, and we are saying banks, all we need to do is create the incentives that make it very, very attractive to banks, which we have created. The fund is not for the banks. I give you an example. I go back to the Anchor Borrowers Program. We set up the Anchor Borrowers Program. Banks were supposed to provide 75% security for them to access the fund. They said no, it was too risky for them. We pulled it down to 50%. The banks came, they said it was too risky for them. We pulled it down to 30%. Banks were asking us to give them 100% guarantee on our own fund. And we said no. That was why we went to Bank of Agriculture. So we have created all the incentive. There's nothing that says that every two economy, it depends on what you find in your economy, should operate the same way. Are you getting the point? Yes, it might happen in America, it might happen in India, but it's a liberalized financial system. All we need to do, create the enabling environment for the banks, create incentives that make it comfortable for the bank, where they will be able to make enough margin in any of the resources they access from the Central Bank of Nigeria.
I see many people writing in here saying that accessing, the banks are always attaching accessing these funds with them providing landed property with C of O, and that makes it hard for investors to even access. And they also complain that while they don't get it, their foreign counterparts come in here and get it, and they wonder what exactly is going on. How can CBN intervene in this?
Okay, any person saying it's only the foreign partners access the fund, it's not really speaking the fact. We know there are a lot of Nigerians who have benefited from the fund. And you talk about collateral. Can I put it in a very light mode? Depending on how much you are assessing. For smallholder farmers, for small entrepreneurs, they don't need to put up any form of collateral. And that's where we're talking about taking them through processes that will remove the risk that banks faces when they lend to the smallholder farmers. And I take you back under the Anchor Borrowers Program. We have over 7-8 risk mitigation strategies that will put in place that will make it comfortable for them to lend to smallholder farmers without any form of
so
collateral.
You fault,
but for the large-scale enterprises, there's no free lunch, even in Freetown. There's no way you will not have commitment in your business. And from the Nigeria we know, from experience, from my personal experience in development financing for over 30 years, if for a large-scale producer without any form of collateral, the banks will run into a big problem. Any businessman will have something at stake in his business. And that's why they ask them for collateral. If you provide the collateral, they don't ask anything excessive. Because the banks also, when they are assessing the CBN fund, also put it, for example, I give you example of the commercial agriculture. Banks bring entrepreneurs, farmers in the value chain, agricultural value chain to borrow under the commercial agriculture. But banks take all the credit risk. In the event of the entrepreneur, we expect them to assess the project well. In the event of any default, they have the account with us. That's the rule. So they must take a level of collateral. There's no business in the world where entrepreneurs don't put down their collateral. Particularly the large scale.
Let me quickly take you up on an issue which you raised. You talked about 500 billion naira domiciled in the Bank of Industry, which is supposed to aid manufacturing.
Yes.
Now, manufacturers will complain, as we've heard the manufacturers talk about how it's difficult to access, some of these loan facilities or this credit. They will complain and tell you that in the Bank of Industry, you only get equipment bought for you. So if you already have the equipment and you need some cash to perhaps stay afloat, you cannot access those funds at the rate which the Bank of Industry gives out.
Any entrepreneur saying that is not really telling the fact, because we have guidelines for every fund that we're establishing. We have working capital. We have a fund for capital equipment.
So you say that the
Yes.
Bank of Industry is allowed to give out working capital?
Yes, Bank of Industry gives out working capital. There's no bank that don't give out working capital. It's entrenched in our guidelines.
Can we begin to access, or should we, assess, I think that's the word to use now, assess some of the impact that the CBN, through this intervention, can the CBN give out any statistics on what impact they've had through this interventionist policies?
I know that the RRF, that is the Refinancing and Restructuring Facility, one of those facilities with Bank of Industry, that's within that 500 billion, because there are two components of it, the power and airline intervention and restructuring and refinancing facility. In terms of employment generation, we have over 26,000 employment generated since it was established. If for the power and airline intervention, we have put into the national grid over 1,000 megawatts of electricity. In short, like I used to tell my friends when I was a director for the airline power and airline intervention, I said all the planes in Nigeria would have been falling from the sky if not for that intervention.
Mr. Eluhaiwe, I think that will be a fine place to leave it. We've totally run out of time.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Mr. Paul Eluhaiwe, who is the Special Advisor to the CBN Governor on Development Finance. Sunrise Daily will continue in just a moment. Do join us again.